The Buddha sat beneath the sprawling branches of the Bodhi tree, his gaze serene, his words profound and timeless. Life bears wounds. Much like a tree, the Buddha began. Yet, the tree grows. Reaching toward the sun with unwavering resilience, his disciples listened, their hearts stirred by the imagery painted through his words, heavy with the weight of life's struggles. "Tell me," the Buddha asked, his voice soft, "why do we cling to our pain, refusing to heal?" A disciple ventured, "Master, the memory of our pain feels sharper than the pain itself. We are unable to let it go." The Buddha nodded. Indeed, the mind clutches the wound, turning it into a barrier that hinders us from growth and joy. He gestured toward a nearby tree, its bark marred by scars, yet its canopy full of vibrant leaves swaying in the breeze. "Look upon this tree," he instructed. "It accepts its scars yet continues to grow, to blossom, and to bear fruit." Another disciple asked hesitantly, "Master, how can we learn to forgive ourselves? How can we move beyond our scars?" "Forgiveness begins with understanding," the Buddha replied. "It begins when we stop resisting impermanence and embrace the fluid nature of existence." He continued, "What is impermanent is fleeting, and what is fleeting holds no weight to define the essence of your being. How can we embrace impermanence?" A disciple questioned, their tone tinged with desperation to find relief from their inner turmoil. The Buddha smiled gently. "Let us examine impermanence through the wound itself. Do the tree's scars stay bleeding forever?" The disciples contemplated this. "No, Master," one answered. "The wound heals. The sap dries. The scar fades, though it remains as a mark." And yet, the Buddha said, the tree does not reject its scars. It wears them as part of its history, not its identity. He paused, allowing the disciples to absorb the depth of the metaphor, their breaths soft against the stillness surrounding them. Our struggles with self-forgiveness arise from this failure to separate the wound from our identity, the Buddha explained. We perceive ourselves as the scar itself, instead of recognizing we are the tree, the bearer of growth and resilience. The disciples bowed their heads, their silence laden with introspection as they reflected upon their own inner struggles. One asked, "Master, can the mind ever let go of guilt completely? Or does it always carry the weight of its burdens?" The Buddha's eyes met theirs with compassion. "The mind can let go, but only if you choose not to hold on." He continued, "When you forgive yourself, you release the grip upon your suffering and allow space for healing and transformation." "But, Master," another disciple argued softly, "is it not wrong to forgive oneself for causing harm or making mistakes?" "Wrongness lies not in forgiveness," the Buddha said. "Wrongness lies in repeated actions that harm. Forgiveness halts the cycle of suffering. Forgiveness is not permission to repeat the mistake," he clarified. "It is the wisdom that ensures you learn and grow beyond it." The disciples considered his words, their hearts yearning to untangle the threads of guilt woven into their beings. The Buddha spoke again, his tone unwavering yet tender. "Imagine your pain as an arrow piercing your side. Does pulling it free erase the wound?" "Master," a disciple said, "pulling the arrow free does not erase the wound, but it begins the process of healing." "Exactly," the Buddha affirmed. "Forgiveness begins the process of healing. It does not negate the past, but it liberates the future." One disciple leaned forward, their voice trembling with vulnerability. "Master, why does guilt feel so powerful? Why does it hold us so firmly?" "Guilt feels powerful," the Buddha replied, "because it gives the illusion of control, of rewriting the past through suffering in the present. But this illusion," he continued, "is false. No amount of guilt can undo a mistake or rewrite the story already written." The disciples nodded, though their hearts carried the weight of acceptance like a heavy stone dropped into a serene pond. Release your illusion, the Buddha encouraged. Accept the mistake, acknowledge the scar, and focus on nurturing the new leaves of your growth. He gestured once more toward the scarred tree. Like the tree, you are not defined by your wounds, but by your resilience. The disciples bowed deeply, their movements reverent, for within the Buddha's words lay a pathway to liberation from self-imposed burdens. They left the grove carrying the Buddha's teachings within them, ready to confront their guilt and embrace forgiveness in its truest form. Another day, the Buddha walked to the banks of a flowing river, his disciples following him with quiet curiosity. The river sparkled under the sun, its currents steady and unwavering, carrying fallen leaves and twigs onward effortlessly. The Buddha turned to his disciples and asked, "What do you see when you observe this river's movement?" "It flows without resistance, Master," one disciple answered. "It moves freely, taking everything in its path with grace and calm." The Buddha nodded. "Indeed, the river flows without struggle. It neither clings to the leaves nor refuses the twigs. But we, as humans, often resist life's currents," he continued. "We cling to our guilt, fearing to let go." A disciple asked, "Master, why do we hold on to guilt? Why does letting go feel like surrendering something valuable?" "Guilt creates an illusion of control," the Buddha explained. "We believe suffering can rewrite the past, though this belief is false." He knelt beside the river, dipping his hand into the cool water, watching it flow smoothly across his fingers. "Self-forgiveness is like this river," he said. "It moves forward, accepting what has fallen, releasing what it cannot hold." Another disciple ventured, "Master, how can we learn to flow like the river? How can we release our burdens and move forward?" The Buddha smiled gently. "Begin by understanding that clinging to guilt only poisons the current of your present moment. When we refuse to release the leaves of regret, we halt our journey and stagnate, trapped within the weight of the past." The disciples gazed at the river, its tranquility reflecting the wisdom of the Buddha's words, their hearts heavy with reflection. "Tell me," the Buddha asked, "does the river regret carrying leaves? Does it mourn the twigs it has released?" "Master," a disciple replied, "the river simply accepts and flows. It holds no regret, no mourning for what has passed. So too must you learn to release regret," the Buddha instructed. "Let go of what has fallen and embrace your journey." Another disciple approached the river, dipping their hand into the water, feeling its smooth, steady flow against their skin. "Master," they asked, "what if guilt feels like a weight that cannot be released? What if it drowns us entirely?" The Buddha's gaze softened. "Guilt is heavy only when carried alone. Forgiveness lightens the burden, allowing the current to carry it away." He gestured toward the river's surface, where a floating leaf moved onward, caught in the gentle embrace of the stream. "Release your guilt into the current," he encouraged. "Do not fight the flow, but trust it to guide you toward healing." A disciple asked, "Master, how do we trust the current when it feels unknown? When the future feels uncertain and unclear?" "Trust begins with acceptance," the Buddha replied. "When you accept the impermanence of life, you free yourself from fear of the unknown. The river flows because it trusts the earth to guide it. It does not question its path, nor fear its destination." The disciples bowed their heads, their hearts resonating with the truth of the Buddha's teachings, their burdens slowly beginning to lift. Another disciple hesitated before asking, "Master, does letting go mean forgetting? Can forgiveness coexist with the memory of mistakes?" "Letting go is not forgetting," the Buddha answered. "It is accepting the memory without allowing it to define your present moment. Forgiveness acknowledges the past but releases its hold, allowing you to move forward without being bound to what has fallen." The disciples watched the river as its currents carried away fallen leaves, the simplicity of its motion calming their restless minds. The Buddha spoke again, his tone unwavering yet kind. Imagine guilt as a boulder placed within a river's path. What happens? The current flows around it, a disciple said. But the boulder disrupts the flow, causing turbulence and slowing the movement. Exactly, the Buddha affirmed. Guilt disrupts your flow, creating resistance that hinders your journey toward healing and self-forgiveness. But the river does not stop, he continued. It adapts, finds its way around obstacles, and continues its journey toward the ocean. So must you, the Buddha instructed. Adapt to your obstacles, release your resistance, and continue moving forward with grace and acceptance. The disciples bowed deeply, their movements reverent, for within the Buddha's words lay a pathway to liberation from self-imposed burdens. They left the river carrying the Buddha's teachings within them, ready to confront their guilt and embrace forgiveness in its truest form. Another day, the Buddha gathered his disciples in a quiet grove, the evening light casting long shadows upon the earth. The flickering lamp illuminated their faces, as they sat in reverent silence, awaiting the Buddha's wisdom to guide them. The Buddha held up a polished mirror, its surface reflecting the glow of the lamp and the faces gazing at him. What do you see in this mirror? The Buddha asked, his tone calm, yet his gaze sharp and probing. The disciples responded, we see our reflections, Master. We see ourselves staring back, marked by the details of our features. The Buddha placed the mirror upon the ground, allowing it to reflect the lamp's light, casting patterns upon the grove's floor. To struggle with self-forgiveness, the Buddha began, is to see only blemishes upon your reflection, rejecting the wholeness of your being. The disciples looked at the mirror again, their hearts heavy, their minds recalling the imperfections they often fixated upon. One disciple hesitated before asking, Master, how can we see beyond the blemishes? How can we embrace the wholeness of ourselves? The Buddha's voice was gentle, his presence calming. When you gaze into the mirror, what you see is not truth, but mere reflection. The mirror shows only the surface, he continued. True self-forgiveness requires looking beyond surface judgment into the depths of your being. The disciples remained quiet, the stillness of the grove amplifying the weight of the Buddha's words within their hearts. To forgive oneself, the Buddha said, is to recognize your humanity, embrace your imperfection, and understand forgiveness flows freely from within. He extinguished the lamp, plunging the grove into darkness. Yet, the disciples felt no fear, for a light kindled within them. The Buddha spoke once more, his voice carrying through the darkness. As the disciples listened with unwavering attention, when you focus solely on cracks within your reflection, he said, you fail to see the light shining through them. You are not defined by your blemishes, he continued. You are defined by the entirety of your being, its light and shadows. A disciple asked softly, Master, how can we stop focusing on the cracks? How can we see the light within? Begin by acknowledging the cracks, the Buddha replied. Accept them without judgment, for they are a natural part of existence. Every being bears imperfections, he said, but imperfections are not failures. They are reminders of growth, of lessons learned and wisdom gained. The disciples listened intently, their breaths quiet, their thoughts lingering upon the truths they were learning in this sacred moment. Forgiveness is not earned through perfection, the Buddha said. It is given freely by the light that resides within your heart. Another disciple ventured, Master, how do we find this light within us? How do we learn to give forgiveness freely? The light within you shines when you cease judgment, the Buddha replied. It appears when you embrace compassion for yourself and others. Compassion nurtures the light, he continued. It breaks through the darkness of guilt, illuminating the path toward healing and liberation. The disciples bowed their heads, their movements reverent, For within the Buddha's words lay wisdom to transcend their struggles with guilt. One disciple hesitated before asking, "Master, what if the guilt feels overwhelming? What if it clouds our ability to see the light?" "Guilt clouds your vision because you feed its strength," the Buddha explained. "But the light within you cannot be extinguished. When you stop feeding guilt," he said, "you weaken its hold, allowing your inner light to shine, guiding you toward forgiveness." Another disciple spoke softly, "Master, how can we stop feeding guilt? How can we break free from its grasp upon us?" "Begin by understanding that guilt is an illusion," the Buddha replied. "It deceives you into believing suffering is the path to redemption. But suffering is not redemption," he continued. "Redemption comes through transformation, through growth and learning from mistakes, not through self-punishment." The grove remained quiet, the disciples absorbed in the Buddha's teachings, their hearts beginning to release the weight of their burdens. The Buddha held up the mirror once again, though darkness now cloaked the grove, its surface no longer reflecting visible light. "The reflection may vanish in darkness," he said, "but you remain whole, unchanged, unseen but present, a being of light and shadow." The disciples gazed at the mirror, their breaths steady, their minds contemplating the depths of forgiveness and the truths within them. "Self-forgiveness is not a destination," the Buddha said. "It is a journey, an ongoing process of healing and embracing your humanity." He placed the mirror upon the ground, allowing it to reflect the stars that now glittered above, twinkling within its polished surface. "As the stars shine through the darkness," the Buddha said, "so too does your light shine through the cracks of imperfection. You are not broken," he continued. "You are whole, with light that transforms shadows into wisdom, a beacon of growth and strength." The disciples bowed deeply, their movements reverent, for within the Buddha's words lay liberation from self-imposed burdens and paths to healing. They left the grove carrying the Buddha's teachings within them, ready to confront their guilt and embrace forgiveness in its truest form. But when your heart is still and clear, it reflects truth. Sundari, emboldened by the Buddha's teachings, asked, "Master, how can we polish the mirror of our hearts to reflect truth?" The Buddha smiled faintly, his expression serene, and replied, "Wisdom and compassion are the tools that polish the heart's mirror." Thank you for watching. Buddha's teachings are always with you. Subscribe to our channel and we will see you in the next video.